Have you ever paused for a second and wondered how thin the line really is between who you think you are and what you're capable of becoming? Not in some dramatic, cinematic way, but quietly, uncomfortably. The kind of question that creeps in when life feels ordinary, when nothing seems wrong, when you're just another person moving through routines, convinced of your own decency. Now imagine that line, the one separating the good person from the monster, being far closer than you'd ever like to admit. Picture yourself in the middle of an average day. The noise of normal life hums in the background. Emails, deadlines, small talk. And then something shifts. Circumstances change, rules loosen, accountability fades. Suddenly the standards you believed defined you no longer apply. In that moment, would you still be the person you claim to be? Or would something darker step forward, something you've always assumed wasn't part of you? That assumption, that evil belongs to other people, is one of the most comforting lies we tell ourselves. And it's exactly the lie Philip Zimbardo tears apart in the Lucifer Effect. This isn't a book about monsters hiding in shadows. It's about ordinary people. People who look like you, think like you, live like you, and under the right conditions, do things they never imagined themselves capable of. You probably think of yourself as a decent human being. Maybe you help others when it's convenient. Maybe you pride yourself on having morals. But let's strip away the flattering narrative for a moment. Have you ever crossed a line simply because you knew there would be no consequences? Taken something small, bent a rule, looked away when it benefited you? These moments feel insignificant, but they are where the descent begins, not with atrocities. Permission. Zimbardo's work makes something disturbingly clear. Evil doesn't arrive fully formed. It grows, quietly, incrementally. It starts as a compromise you justify, a rule you reinterpret, a line you step over because nothing bad happens afterward. And once you learn that nothing happens, stepping over the next line becomes easier. Consider Ivan Chip Frederick. Before Abu Ghraib, he wasn't a villain. He wasn't unstable. He wasn't violent. He was painfully average, a regular guy with a stable background, normal intelligence, and no history of cruelty. And yet, inside that environment, inside that system, he became a participant in acts that shocked the world, not because he was born broken, but because the situation reshaped him. That's the part people don't like to confront. The idea that character isn't fixed, that morality isn't permanent, that who you are changes depending on where you are, who's watching, and what you're told is acceptable. We want to believe we're consistent, that we carry our values intact into every circumstance. But that belief collapses the moment pressure enters the room. Psychology has proven this again and again. You are not the same person in every situation. You speak differently, act differently, decide differently. And when authority enters the equation, when someone with power gives direction, the shift becomes dangerous. Experiments like Milgram's didn't reveal sadists. They revealed compliance. Ordinary people inflicting pain not because they wanted to, but because they were told it was necessary. The unsettling truth is this: most people don't become cruel because they desire cruelty. They become cruel because the environment rewards obedience and discourages resistance. Because responsibility feels diluted. Because someone else seems to be in charge. And once that happens, conscience grows quiet. What makes this terrifying isn't that evil exists. It's that it doesn't require hatred, rage, or malice. It only requires distance. Distance from consequences, from responsibility, from the humanity of others. And under the right conditions, that distance forms quickly. This isn't about fear, it's about awareness. Because the moment you accept that you are immune, you become vulnerable. And the moment you recognize your potential for darkness, you gain the power to resist it. And this is only the beginning. Once you accept that darkness is not something external, not something reserved for criminals or villains in history books, the way you look at human behavior begins to change. You stop asking why people do terrible things and start asking under what conditions they do them. This shift is uncomfortable because it removes the safety net of moral superiority. You are no longer standing above the problem, you are standing inside it. Zimbardo's central warning is not that people are evil, but that situations are powerful enough to bend almost anyone. Systems shape behavior more aggressively than personality ever could. Uniforms, roles, rules, and expectations quietly rewrite internal boundaries. When people are placed into environments where power is unbalanced and accountability is blurred, behavior adapts faster than conscience can react. What feels shocking from the outside often feels normal from the inside. This is how moral disengagement works. You don't wake up one day deciding to abandon your values. You slowly detach from them. Language changes first. People stop being people and become labels. Them, subjects, enemies. Once someone is reduced to a category, empathy weakens. And when empathy weakens, cruelty becomes easier to justify, not because you enjoy it, but because it no longer feels personal. Responsibility also fractures in these environments. When authority figures give instructions, the weight of decision-making shifts upward. You tell yourself you're just following orders, just doing your job, just playing your role. Each individual action feels small, but together they form something massive. And because no single step feels extreme, the final outcome feels disconnected from the beginning. What's disturbing is how often good intentions coexist with harmful actions. People convince themselves they are maintaining order, ensuring safety, or protecting a greater good. They don't see themselves as perpetrators. They see themselves as necessary components of a system. This self-image acts as armor, shielding them from guilt while allowing behavior to escalate. Even more unsettling is how quickly resistance disappears once isolation sets in. When everyone around you seems to accept what's happening, silence feels safer than opposition. Doubt becomes private, obedience becomes visible, and slowly the idea of speaking up feels more dangerous than staying quiet. This is how entire groups drift in the same direction without ever agreeing to do so. The most dangerous moment is not when harm begins, but when it starts to feel routine, when actions lose emotional weight, when discomfort fades, when you realize you're no longer shocked by things that once would have stopped you cold. That numbness is not a failure of character, it's a human response to prolonged exposure. And it's exactly what allows systems of abuse to persist. Zimbardo doesn't argue that people are powerless. He argues that power must be recognized before it can be resisted. Awareness is the first defense. Understanding how situations manipulate behavior gives you a chance to pause, to question, to step outside the role being handed to you. But without that awareness, you don't choose the descent, you drift into it. And the hardest part to accept is this: most people who fall into these patterns never believe they have. They still see themselves as reasonable, justified, even ethical. From the inside, the line between right and wrong doesn't disappear, it moves. And that realization forces a deeper question. If the environment shapes behavior this easily, then what does it take to remain human when the system demands otherwise? That question leads us deeper. If situations can bend morality, then the next question becomes unavoidable. What keeps anyone from breaking? Why do some people cross the line while others stop, hesitate, or walk away entirely? Zimbardo's research reveals something unsettling. Resistance is rarely about strength or virtue. It's about awareness, identity, and timing. Most people don't fail because they want to. They fail because they don't realize they're being pulled until they're already moving. One of the most dangerous forces at play is anonymity. When your identity dissolves, so does your sense of responsibility. Uniforms, numbers, masks, and online usernames all serve the same psychological function. They create distance between action and accountability. When no one can see you, or when you feel like just another interchangeable part, behavior shifts. You stop acting as an individual and start acting as a role, and roles don't feel guilt, people do. This is why crowds behave differently than individuals, why people online say things they would never say face to face, why power feels intoxicating when it's detached from consequence. De-individuation doesn't erase morality instantly. It erodes it. It whispers that your actions don't really matter, that you're not fully responsible, that someone else will answer for the outcome. Dehumanization works alongside this process. It doesn't require hatred. It only requires emotional distance. When others are framed as animals, threats, problems, or statistics, empathy becomes optional. Pain stops feeling real. Suffering becomes abstract. And once someone is no longer fully human in your mind, the limits on how they can be treated quietly dissolve. History repeats this pattern relentlessly. Atrocities are rarely committed by people who see themselves as cruel. They are committed by people who see themselves as justified. Language plays a critical role here. Harm is rebranded, violence is sanitized, torture becomes necessary pressure, death becomes collateral. Words soften reality until conscience no longer recognizes what's happening. What makes this especially dangerous is how convincing these narratives feel in the moment. When ideology wraps itself in moral language, resistance starts to look irresponsible, questioning feels disloyal, doubt feels like weakness, and slowly, people stop asking whether something is right and start asking whether it is permitted. Yet even within these conditions, not everyone complies. Some people refuse, some step back, some break rank, and when asked why, they often struggle to explain. Not because the reason is complex, but because it's simple. At some point, they claimed ownership of their actions. They didn't outsource responsibility upward. They didn't dissolve into the system. They stayed present. This is where the idea of heroism becomes relevant, not as spectacle but as interruption. Heroism is rarely loud. It's the moment someone says no when yes would be easier, the moment someone acts while others freeze, the moment someone refuses to let the situation decide for them. What separates those moments from the rest isn't courage in the cinematic sense. It's awareness combined with accountability, the ability to recognize manipulation in real time, to feel pressure and still choose consciously. That skill isn't innate. It's trained through reflection, discomfort, and the willingness to stand alone. This brings us to an uncomfortable truth. Most people don't fail morally because they are bad. They fail because they are unprepared to recognize the forces acting on them, unprepared to resist authority, unprepared to hold responsibility when it would be easier to let it go. The question isn't whether you have the capacity for darkness. You do. The question is whether you will notice when the conditions begin to invite it. Because by the time evil looks obvious, it's usually already too late. The most unsettling realization is not that evil exists, but that it rarely announces itself. It doesn't arrive wearing horns or carrying warnings. It enters quietly, disguised as routine, as duty, as necessity. By the time people recognize what they've become part of, their identity is already entangled with the behavior. Walking away would mean admitting complicity, and the human mind resists that kind of fracture at all costs. This is why people rationalize instead of rebel. The psyche protects itself by rewriting the story. Harm becomes justified. Victims become deserving. Choices become inevitable. Each explanation dulls discomfort just enough to allow the next step. And because each step is small, the distance traveled feels invisible until you look back and realize how far you've gone. Zimbardo emphasized that systems reward compliance long before they punish cruelty. Following the rules brings approval, safety, belonging. Resistance brings friction, isolation, risk. When survival is tied to obedience, conscience starts to feel like a liability. And so people learn to silence it, not all at once, but gradually, the way you lower the volume on a sound that's become inconvenient. What makes this even more dangerous is the illusion of normality. When everyone around you participates, behavior feels validated. The abnormal becomes standard, the unthinkable becomes policy, and dissent begins to feel extreme, even irrational. This is how moral standards shift without anyone formally agreeing to change them. There is also a deep psychological comfort in surrendering responsibility. Carrying the weight of one's actions is exhausting. Letting authority decide feels relieving. When someone else defines what is acceptable, you no longer have to wrestle with uncertainty. You don't have to think. You don't have to doubt. You just execute. That relief is seductive, and it's one of the strongest drivers of obedience. But here's the fracture point. Every system depends on individuals choosing to uphold it. Systems don't act. People do. And no matter how many layers of authority exist above you, your hands still carry out the action. Your voice still speaks the words. Your silence still allows the outcome. Responsibility never fully disappears. It only hides. This is where conscience re-enters the picture, not as a loud moral voice, but as quiet unease, a tension in the body, a hesitation before acting, a thought you quickly dismiss. Most people feel this signal. Few stop to examine it. The tragedy is not that conscience fails, but that it's ignored. Those who resist often describe the same moment, a pause, a brief interruption where they step outside the momentum of the situation and see it clearly. They don't necessarily know the right answer. They just know that continuing feels wrong. And instead of suppressing that feeling, they honor it. Resistance doesn't require certainty. It requires presence, the willingness to stay conscious when the environment encourages numbness, to remain human when systems prefer efficiency, to feel discomfort instead of anesthetizing it with excuses. This is why moral collapse is rarely dramatic. It's subtle, it's procedural, it's efficient, and that's exactly what makes it so dangerous. Because the real threat isn't monsters, it's ordinary people who stop paying attention. And yet, the paradox is this. Within the same mind capable of following orders into cruelty lies the capacity for courage, for defiance, for profound human goodness. The human psyche is a battlefield, not a fixed blueprint. You can be both fragile and formidable, monstrous and heroic, sometimes within the same hour. What determines the path you take is not fate but attention, the willingness to notice yourself as you act, to name the impulses within, and to pause before stepping into them. Zimbardo's work reminds us that heroes are not born in grand theaters of war. They emerge in the everyday, the person who refuses to participate in gossip that spreads cruelty, the clerk who speaks up against an unjust policy, the neighbor who intervenes when someone is bullied. Heroism is ordinary people choosing to act despite fear, discomfort, or social pressure. It's the conscious acknowledgement that I am not a bystander, even when everyone else is. This is the lesson that history attempts to whisper, but often shouts in the form of catastrophe. Evil is contagious, but so is courage. Just as a tyrant's orders can ripple through thousands, one person's defiance can inspire countless others. One choice can break the cycle. One refusal to obey can plant seeds that grow into collective resistance. What Zimbardo illustrates is that moral courage is infectious in ways that fear and cruelty are not, because fear requires isolation, whereas courage is shared and recognized. And yet, courage is not automatic. It is fragile. It requires constant nurturing. It demands self-reflection, the willingness to examine uncomfortable truths about yourself, and the discipline to act against ingrained impulses. It asks you to interrogate the authority of tradition, the seduction of conformity, and the comfort of anonymity. It asks, in the quiet moments when no one is watching, that you consider what you would do, not just what you are told to do. Equally important is empathy. Zimbardo exposes the way humans dehumanize others, turning them into abstractions, numbers, animals, objects. When this happens, cruelty becomes almost inevitable. But empathy reverses this process. Seeing the full humanity of another, even one you disagree with, even one you fear, is a moral vaccine. It restores conscience, amplifies courage, and reinforces the ability to act rightly under pressure. Empathy is a choice, but a powerful one. The more you practice it, the stronger it becomes, until the reflex to see, feel, and protect others is ingrained, not optional. The lessons do not remain theoretical. They are practical, immediate, and urgent. Daily life offers microcosms of the forces Zimbardo identifies: the pressure to conform, the ease of moral shortcuts, the temptation to ignore suffering, the seduction of authority, and the concealment of responsibility. At every turn, you are confronted by small tests that, over time, either strengthen your moral spine or corrode it. It is in these small decisions, writing a check to someone in need, defending a colleague from ridicule, speaking truth to someone in power, that character is forged. But Zimbardo does not leave us in despair. The human capacity for reflection, self-awareness, and moral choice is profound. Recognizing your own potential for darkness does not doom you to it. It equips you to resist it. The insight that ordinary circumstances can provoke extraordinary cruelty is not a sentence. It is a call to vigilance, a reminder to actively shape who you become. Awareness is the weapon, choice is the action, and conscience is the compass. As you confront this duality within yourself, the path to heroism becomes clear. Observe your reactions, notice your impulses, interrogate your assumptions, and never outsource your moral responsibility. Authority may command, systems may incentivize, and social norms may pressure, but ultimately, the decision to harm or help rests with you. Each act of conscious attention is an act of resistance against the inertia that drags ordinary people into cruelty. History offers ample proof of the consequences when people fail to act. Atrocities large and small have unfolded where people remain silent, compliant, or indifferent. But it also offers proof that one individual's moral stance can create ripples of change. Zimbardo's message is stark but empowering. The line between monster and hero is not outside you. It runs through the heart of every human being. Knowing this equips you with both caution and possibility. So, the question you must ask yourself each day is not whether evil exists. It does, and it is closer than you imagine, but whether you will participate or resist. When you feel the tug of obedience, the relief of anonymity, the ease of moral compromise, pause, reflect, choose. And remember that heroism is not reserved for the extraordinary. It is defined by ordinary people deciding, moment by moment, to act rightly. In the end, Zimbardo's The Lucifer Effect is more than a study of evil. It is a guide to consciousness. It challenges you to see your own shadow, recognize the forces that shape your actions, and embrace the responsibility that comes with awareness. It is a call to vigilance, a manual for courage, and a reminder that every human is a site of both light and darkness. The abyss may hover nearby, but it is your awareness, your empathy, and your choice that determine whether you fall or rise. And so, as you navigate the complex terrain of life, remember, you are capable of monstrous cruelty and boundless heroism alike. The deciding factor is how consciously you choose to engage with the world around you. Stand alert, stand human, stand courageous. Every decision matters. Every choice shapes who you are. And every act of moral courage brings light into a world that too often teeters on darkness.